In the winter of 1846, a group of pioneers known as the Donner Party set out for California in search of a new life. Instead, they found themselves trapped in the frozen Sierra Nevada mountains. Snow piled high, supplies vanished, and desperation grew with each passing day. Their struggle for survival would become one of the darkest and most infamous chapters in American history. The Donner Party's journey began with hope. In the spring of 1846, nearly 90 pioneers set out from Missouri, traveling westward along the Oregon Trail. Like thousands of others, they were drawn by the promise of fertile land, opportunity, and a new beginning in California. The group included families with children, wagons full of supplies, and a determination to carve out a future in an untamed land. Among them were the Donner and Reed families, who would later lend their names to the ill-fated expedition. Spirits were high as they traveled across the Great Plains, passing endless prairies and rivers under the vast summer sky. But as the journey stretched on, challenges mounted. Harsh terrain, sick livestock, and the daily grind of life on the trail began to take their toll. The pivotal decision came when the party reached Fort Bridger, Wyoming. There they faced a choice: follow the well-traveled trail north, or attempt a new route advertised by Lansford Hastings, known as the Hastings Cutoff. Hastings promised it was shorter, saving weeks of travel. The Donner Party, eager to reach California before winter, chose the cutoff. It would prove a fatal mistake. Instead of saving time, the route led them through treacherous mountains, barren deserts, and endless miles of rugged wilderness. Wagons broke down, oxen collapsed, and tempers flared as delays piled up. By the time they rejoined the main trail, the Donner Party had lost precious weeks. The shadow of winter was already closing in, and the Sierra Nevada loomed ahead like an ominous wall of snow and stone. By late October of 1846, the Donner Party reached the eastern edge of the Sierra Nevada. Snow had already begun to fall, heavier and earlier than expected. Wagons struggled through drifts, and oxen sank into the frozen ground. What had been a grueling journey now turned into a desperate race against the advancing winter. The pioneers set up camp near Truckee Lake, later renamed Donner Lake, believing they could push through once the weather cleared. But instead of easing, the storms intensified. Snow piled over 20 feet deep, blocking every mountain pass. The settlers were trapped, their wagons immobilized, and their path to California cut off completely. At first they rationed what little food remained: flour, beans, and dried meat. Families stretched meals as far as possible, boiling rawhide and leather when supplies dwindled. Hunger gnawed at them day and night, and the howling wind outside their makeshift shelters never ceased. The sound of branches cracking under the weight of snow became the backdrop to their suffering. Tensions rose as conditions worsened. Some accused others of poor leadership, while others despaired at their dwindling chances of survival. Fires were difficult to maintain in the relentless storms, and illness spread quickly in the cold, damp shelters. Children cried from hunger, their parents powerless to comfort them. As days turned into weeks, hope faded. The realization dawned that unless someone went for help, they would all perish in the frozen wilderness. Thus began the planning of a desperate trek across the mountains, a gamble that would test the limits of human endurance. By December, starvation was setting in. The settlers' bodies weakened, and their spirits frayed as the storms showed no mercy. In desperation, a small group of the strongest men and women prepared to leave the camp and cross the Sierra Nevada on foot in search of help. They became known as the Forlorn Hope. 17 people set out, carrying only meager rations and makeshift snowshoes, crafted from ox yokes and hides. At first they pressed forward with determination, but the snow was chest-deep, and every step drained their strength. The cold gnawed at their bones, and their food supplies dwindled faster than expected. Hunger soon became unbearable. After days of wandering in the blinding snow, their bodies began to fail. Frostbite blackened their limbs, and exhaustion dropped them one by one. When their rations were gone, they faced the most terrible choice of all. To survive, they would have to consume the bodies of those who had already perished. It was a decision born not of cruelty, but of desperation. With no animals to hunt and no plants to forage, they saw no other way forward. Those who could not bring themselves to partake grew weaker, while others forced down what little nourishment they could salvage. The Forlorn Hope pressed on through the mountains, haunted by the faces of the dead. After more than a month, only 7 of the original 17 staggered out of the wilderness and into the Sacramento Valley. Half dead and broken, they told of the desperate plight of the Donner Party, still trapped at Donner Lake, sparking a rescue effort that would become as harrowing as the tragedy itself. When news of the stranded settlers reached California, a rescue effort was quickly organized. Yet the Sierra Nevada in midwinter was nearly impassable. Snowdrifts towered higher than cabins, and blizzards swallowed entire trails. Still, volunteers prepared to risk their lives to reach the Donner Party. The first relief party set out in February 1847, months after the pioneers had been trapped. What they found at Donner Lake shocked even hardened frontiersmen. The camp was buried in snow, cabins nearly invisible beneath white mounds. Inside, the survivors were gaunt, their faces hollow, their eyes sunken with hunger. Some were too weak to stand. The rescuers shared what food they carried, but it was not enough for everyone. They could only take a few settlers back with them, promising to return for the rest. Those left behind wept, torn between hope and despair, as the relief party disappeared into the mountains. In the weeks that followed, more rescue groups arrived, each bringing supplies and leading out survivors. Yet each time, many were forced to stay behind, waiting in the cold for the next attempt. The strongest clung to life, but the weakest, particularly children and the elderly, succumbed to starvation, illness, or exposure. Rumors of cannibalism began to spread. Rescuers whispered of bones stripped clean, of flesh taken from the dead to keep the living alive. Though many survivors denied it, others admitted the truth. In the face of certain death, some had crossed the line society deemed unthinkable. The Donner Party's name would forever be tied to this grim choice. By March of 1847, the story of the Donner Party had spread across California. More rescue missions were dispatched, but each group faced the same horrors: snowbound cabins filled with starving families, bodies buried beneath drifts, and survivors too weak to move. Every attempt to reach them came at great risk, yet volunteers pressed on, determined to save as many as possible. As rescuers entered the camps, the full extent of the suffering became clear. Wagons sat half buried, their wooden frames splintered by the weight of snow. Inside cabins, the smell of death lingered. Survivors clutched scraps of leather or animal hides they had boiled for food. Children lay motionless, their tiny bodies wasting away. Some survivors openly admitted they had eaten the flesh of the dead to endure. Others refused to speak of it, their silence confirming what words could not. Rescuers described seeing bones cracked open for marrow, flesh carved from frozen bodies. It was a horror that few could have imagined when the pioneers first set out with dreams of California's golden promise. The relief parties carried survivors back in small groups, but every journey was grueling. Snowstorms forced them to abandon supplies, and the weak often collapsed along the trail. Some who had survived the winter died on the journey out, too broken to endure one more step. By the time the final rescue attempt arrived in April, nearly half of the Donner Party was dead. Those who lived were forever scarred, their names tied to a tragedy that would echo through American history as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of desperate human endurance. The survivors who finally emerged from the mountains were greeted as both victims and curiosities. Newspapers seized on the sensational details, publishing accounts of starvation, death, and alleged cannibalism. Across the young nation, the Donner Party became a symbol of both tragedy and resilience, their story retold in shocked whispers around campfires and in the headlines of growing cities. For many, the horror overshadowed the context. The pioneers had been families seeking opportunity, ordinary men, women, and children caught in extraordinary circumstances. Yet they were remembered less for their courage than for the choices forced upon them in the frozen wilderness. Critics condemned them, while sympathizers argued that survival sometimes demands unthinkable sacrifices. Among the survivors, silence became common. Few wished to speak of what they endured. Some tried to rebuild their lives quietly, but the shadow of Donner Lake followed them. Children who had survived grew up with the weight of rumors and judgment, their identities tied to a tragedy they could never escape. Historians and chroniclers debated the events for decades. Was it poor leadership, bad luck, or blind faith in a false shortcut that doomed the expedition. Each theory revealed part of the truth, but none could erase the suffering. The Hastings Cutoff, the route that promised a shortcut to California, became infamous as the path that had led an entire group into the jaws of winter. Even as California blossomed during the gold rush, just a few years later, the story of the Donner Party served as a dark reminder that the West's promise was matched only by its peril. As the years passed, the Donner Party became more than a tragedy. It became legend. For some, it was a grim warning about the dangers of ambition and poor judgment. For others, it was a story of endurance, a testament to the human will to survive at any cost. The debate over whether the settlers should be remembered with sympathy or condemnation echoed through American history. Writers and historians examined the expedition in countless books and articles. They traced the mistakes, the decision to trust Lansford Hastings' untested cutoff, the delays along the trail, the heavy wagons that slowed progress, and the fateful timing of their arrival at the Sierra Nevada. Each detail became part of the puzzle, an attempt to explain how nearly half the group never made it to California. But beyond analysis, the Donner Party captured the darker side of the American dream. The westward migration was fueled by visions of prosperity, freedom, and fertile land, yet it also demanded immense risk. For the Donners, the dream ended in isolation, hunger, and death. Their story reminded settlers that the wilderness was as cruel as it was promising. Folklore soon added its own layers. Tales of hauntings at Donner Lake spread, with travelers claiming to hear cries in the night or to see shadowy figures in the snow. While these stories were more myth than fact, they reflected the way the tragedy had carved itself into the imagination of the nation. By the mid-19th century, the Donner Party was no longer just history. It was a cautionary tale, a story retold to warn others of the thin line between hope and disaster. Today, the Donner Party remains one of the most infamous stories of the American frontier. Historians continue to study diaries, letters, and survivor testimonies, piecing together the timeline of suffering and survival. Archaeologists have excavated sites near Donner Lake, uncovering artifacts of daily life, buttons, tools, fragments of bone that serve as stark reminders of the people who once endured the winter there. For modern audiences, the Donner Party represents more than a historical curiosity. It embodies the contradictions of westward expansion, courage and ambition on one hand, tragedy and devastation on the other. It shows how fragile human hope can be in the face of nature's indifference, and how desperation can drive people to choices once thought unimaginable. Museums in California and Nevada preserve the memory of the event, displaying artifacts and recounting the ordeal for new generations. Donner Lake itself, now a place of recreation and beauty, carries a somber legacy beneath its calm waters and snowy peaks. Travelers picnic on the same shores where pioneers once starved, a stark reminder of how the past and present can exist side by side. The legacy of the Donner Party is complex. They were victims of circumstance, poor decisions, and cruel fate, but they were also pioneers who dared to cross a wilderness few understood. Their suffering became a story told across centuries, not only as a cautionary tale, but as a reflection of the lengths to which humans will go to survive. The Donner Party's ordeal remains one of the darkest chapters of America's westward expansion. What began as a journey of hope ended in hunger, loss, and unthinkable choices. Their story endures as both a cautionary tale and a testament to human endurance, reminding us how thin the line can be between survival and tragedy when dreams collide with the unforgiving power of nature.